by picking on that very point. The McCain campaign, the RNC, they're running radio ads in Virginia and Florida that say that if the Democrats had their way, they would raise taxes on families making as little as $42,000 a year. Factcheck.org says that is completely false. So why are you still running the ad?
Well, because I think you're citing a fact check that's not really relevant to that ad, because if you look at the charge they're making is if they're Democrats controlled Congress and Democrats controlled the White House with Barack Obama, they would then pursue the spending initiatives that they voted to approve in their budget resolution, which calls for a repeal of the Bush tax cuts, which calls for trillions of dollars in new spending for pet projects. All they're doing is saying, well, when they voted to prioritize this budget spending, presumably they'll go forward with it. Otherwise, they're all just a bunch of lying politicians. My expectation is they're more of tax raisers than even they are liars.
But Tucker, even if they go forward with it, I mean, the point is, yes, there would be, if you're a single taxpayer making $42,000, yes, you would see your taxes rise by about $15. But in order to have your taxes rise as a family, you have to be making $90,000 under what the Democrats have proposed. So when the ad says that families making $42,000 would see their taxes rise, that's not accurate, is it?
Now, David, I think it is completely accurate and completely reasonable. I think most American voters would agree it's completely reasonable that when you've just spent $1 trillion for a rescue plan, now you're proposing another $300 billion for an economic stimulus plan, which is basically a handout giveaway, again, on top of a stimulus package that was already provided earlier in the year. And you go forward with Barack Obama's plan for $1 trillion in new spending on top of the other trillion, the other $300 billion. How is there not going to be tax increases on hardworking Americans? In fact, the answer is there will be tax increases on hardworking Americans.
But the
Barack Obama won't even admit that he's not going to raise your taxes because he is going to raise your taxes.
Tucker, if it's so important to essentially pay for these new programs, how come then John McCain and the Republicans didn't institute taxes to pay for all the spending on the Iraq War? All of that money is essentially being added to the budget, and nobody's paying for it except for future generations. If the argument that you're making about Barack Obama is that by necessity he would have to raise taxes, couldn't the argument then have been made that John McCain was irresponsible by not raising taxes to pay for the war?
Absolutely not, David, because the reason we're competitive in this race is because John McCain's a different type of Republican. He's the only one that's been in the United States Senate saying the spending is out of control, the budgets are out of control. We need to have the spending mechanisms that are held back so that the American taxpayer can keep more of their money and spend it in the private economy so we can grow jobs. He's had that position not for 2 years, not for 3 years, not for 80 days like Barack Obama. He's had it for 30 years. He's fought this government to keep it smaller. That's why he's qualified to be president. That's why he's ready to be president if we want to make change and we want to improve this economy. So I reject the idea that Barack Obama is some sort of tax cutter, because ultimately you cannot be a tax cutter if you're going to double down on Bush's failed policies of 40% government growth over the course of the last 8 years. It's disastrous. It's disastrous for Main Street. It's disastrous on American taxpayers' pocketbooks.
Tucker,